Good afternoon. I would like to express my gratitude to Thibaut for the invitation for his excellent seminar and the possibility to present the results of our joint Ukrainian-Polish excavations. I am the more happy today because together with me, is Professor Nadia Oksentivna Gavryliuk from the Institute of Archaeology, Ukrainian National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine.
Good afternoon to our colleagues, and I'm very glad to be in this, take part in this events, and we work with Dr. Matera some seasons, 6 seasons. And I'm glad that Professor Matera take part in this very interesting events. Thank you very much. And somewhat I will speak in the end if you divulge me do it.
Okay, let's start our presentation and lecture. And the Konsulovskoe site belongs to the group of 15 so-called Late Scythian Hillforts situated along banks of the lower Dnieper River. This region is located in the Pontic-Caspian steppe zone, which is stretching from the northern shores of Black Sea to the northern area around the Caspian Sea. The Hillfort is located close to Respublikaniec village in Berysław district of Kherson Oblast in southern Ukraine, on the right bank of the steppe slope of the limestone terrace between two deep gullies going down towards the Dnieper, one from the north and another from the south. The total area of the site is 3.5 hectares. Originally, it was probably slightly larger, but intensive erosion of the terrace led to the destruction of part of the site. Currently, the site is located on the right bank of the Kachowka Reservoir, formed as a result of the construction of the Dnieper hydroelectric station in Zaporizhia on the north, and then Kachowka hydroelectric station in Nowa Kachowka on the south. The creation of the Kachowka reservoir strongly changed the hydrological situation in the lower course of the Dnieper. Cartographic sources can prove how much the geographic conditions have changed in this region. For example, on the map of the territories of Grand Duchy of Lithuania, also known as the Radziwiłł map, due to the fact that it was created under the tutelage of Mikołaj Krzysztof the Orphan Radziwiłł, published in 1613, a number of islands and islets is visible in the lower reaches of the Dnieper. These details are clearly visible in the attached map of the lower Dnieper with scale much larger than main map. The islands in the lower reaches of the Dnieper are also visible on the map by Guillaume de Beauplan, published in 1650. I have marked in red the area where Konsulovskoe is located. It is worth noting that the Beauplan's map is considered to fairly accurately reflect the water network, the most important roads, features of the terrain relief, and river crossings. The same situation is visible on the other maps of 18th and 19th century. For example, this is one of the maps from Carte de la Pologne, the atlas consisting of 24 cards, published by Rizzi Zanoni in 1772. Here in the vicinity of Konsulovskoe Hillfort, a number of islands and islets is also visible. And this is a two-verse map of the Russian Empire from the 50s of 19th century, very accurate with a lot of details. Beyond the main riverbed, it shows a series of smaller island branches, broads, islands, and wetlands. There is no doubt that the spatial arrangement of Late Scythian Hillforts of the lower Dnieper area and the location of each of them was related to controlling this part of the river, both for navigation and for crossing. This is confirmed by the fact that Hillforts remained in the zone of mutual visibility, allowing at least the transmission of signals, for example, by means of smoke or fire. The analysis of visibility was done by Dr. Paweł Lech. Its results shows that the scope of visibility covers the entire section of the lower course of the Dnieper, occupied by Late Scythian Hillforts. Let's go back to the Konsulovskoe site. The name Konsulovskoe comes from the name of the nearby village. We do not know when exactly it was founded. The village of Konsulovka or Rozarievka was firstly mentioned in 1795 as property of the General Consul of the Holy Roman Empire, Ivan Grigorovich Rozarievich. At the beginning of 20th century, Konsulovka belonged to Fyodor Semyonovich Agarkov. At his time, a palace, a Lateran church, and several large farm buildings were built there. Only the ruins of these buildings have survived to our time. After the establishment of Soviet power in the region in 1920, the name of the village was changed to Respublikaniec. The history of research of Konsulovskoe started already in the 60s of 19th century, when the site was for the first time shortly described by Alexander Stepanovich Afanasiev-Czurzbiński and then Arseny Pavlovich Chirkov, member of Odessa Society of Amateurs of Antiquities. However, it was mentioned already in 1847 by Semen Ivanovich Myszecki in his famous book Historia o Kazakach Zaporożskich. The information about Konsulovskoe was also published by Vladimir Nikolaevich Yastrebov in 90s of 19th century. In 1912, Viktor Ivanovich Goszkiewicz published the first topographical plan of the Konsulovskoe, which shows separated part of the citadel located in the southeastern corner of the site. This plan was then several times republished. A year later, on the territory of Konsulovskoe site, the first excavation season took place. On its results, Goszkiewicz published a detailed description of the site with characteristics of discovered materials. During these excavations, a section of stone defensive wall protected the main part of the Hillfort from the north was discovered and dated to the turn of eras. By the way, Viktor Goszkiewicz was a founder of Kherson Museum. Further works on the site were carried out only after the Second World War. From the 50s to the end of 20th century, on the territory of Konsulovskoe site, only some trench pits and surveys were done. Modern archaeological research on the territory of the site started in 2014. An expedition of the National Reserve Chortica, together with the Institute of Archaeology, National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, started the research of the Konsulovskoe Hillfort. The impulse to start the works was the appearance of robbery pits in the territory of the site. Some trench pits were done, but their results yielded only limited information on the site. Since 2015, the investigation of the site has been realized as a joint Ukrainian-Polish project in cooperation between National Reserve Chortica, Institute of Archaeology, National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine from the Ukrainian side, and the Institute of Archaeology, currently Faculty of Archaeology, and the Antiquity of Southeastern Europe Research Center. Both institutions from the University of Warsaw from the Polish side. The main purpose of the joint works was to study the fortification system of the Konsulovskoe. Before the commencement of wide plain excavations, non-invasive survey as aerial photography, topographical measurements, and geophysical prospection with use of magnetic and electrical resistivity methods was carried out. Such a wide spectrum of non-invasive survey has never been used in the prospection of any late Scythian hillforts. Magnetic prospection has been performed only on the territory of Czerwony Majak, Hillfort localized about 8 kilometers to the south of the Konsulovskoe. The initial stage of archaeological research has already confirmed Guszkiewicz plan and the presence of rectangular citadel in the southeastern corner of the site. The results of magnetic and resistivity surveys brought the first information about the construction of the fortifications. During the magnetic research, especially in the territory of the citadel, a number of parallel linear anomalies were recorded. The parallel anomalies were also recorded during the resistivity measurements carried out in the area of the citadel fortifications and the northern defense line of the main part of the hillfort. This led to the assumption that the defensive walls were double-faced structures. After carrying out geophysical surveys, systematical archaeological excavations on the territory of Konsulovskoe were started in 2015. In Trench 1, investigated by Ukrainian colleagues, poorly preserved remains of defensive wall were discovered. The trench was set up on the northern line of citadel fortifications. In 2016, a new trench was set up by Polish part of the expedition on the territory of the citadel. It was located in the area of the western defensive line. A part of well-preserved double-faced defensive stone wall with a clay and stone filling was discovered there. The wall was 2 meters 60 centimeters wide. Preserved part of the wall was constructed from big and medium irregular stones bound with a clay. The masonry of both facade was irregular. Stones were laid in quasi-rows, matching the size and shape to the stones next to them. Space between facades was filled with clay and small to medium-sized stones. On the outer facade of the defensive wall, the remains of loose plaster, approximately 7 centimeters thick, was recorded. The defensive wall discovered in Trench 2 was built on a substructure 50 centimeters high in the shape of lower earth bank. No traces of foundation or footing were observed. Along the inner facade of the defensive wall discovered in Trench 2, a stone batters supporting it was discovered. Its construction was laid on alternate layers of ash and glass, resembling the technique used for foundation known from Olbia Pontic. The buttress was preserved to the height of one row of masonry. Perhaps its upper part was made of loose blocks. Its width is from 40 to 70 centimeters. In front of the defensive wall, protecting the citadel area, a drainage ditch about 1 meter 30 centimeters wide and about 50 centimeters deep was dug in the virgin lace. It cannot be ruled out that this ditch was also of strategic importance. Together with the earth bank protruding in front of outer facade of the defensive wall, at 1 meter 10 centimeter. It significantly complicated the direct approach to the fortification line. This drainage ditch cut through the mouth of the earlier pit, which testifies to the fact that the territory of the citadel was separated later. In 2018, the excavations were conducted in Trench 3, located also in the area of the western defensive line of the citadel. There were discovered the remains of gateway. Unfortunately, the state of preservation of the structures discovered in this trench allowed only to obtain a general picture of this part of the fortifications. The gate was 1 meter 60 centimeters wide and was flanked from the north by a curtain of defensive wall and from the south by the tower without an internal room. The defensive wall flanking the gateway from the north, as in the case of defensive wall discovered in the Trench 2, was built on a substructure in the form of a low bank. The preserved height of bank was 32 centimeters, was probably originally slightly high. The surface of the entrance of the citadel territory was covered with an artificial layer of lath, making up the form of its strengthening or possibly substructure under an unsaved pavement. Along the outer side of the tower, the drainage ditch was registered as in the Trench 2. Also in this case, the drainage cut through the earlier pit. In the next seasons, the fortifications of the main part of Konsulovskoe were investigated. In 2019, a section of western defensive wall reinforced with a flanking tower was investigated. The building technique and masonry were analogous to those known from the defensive walls of the citadel. The wall discovered in Trench 5 was also built as double-faced construction. However, its width was lower, in some places only circa 2 meters. There were also no traces of the earth bank on which the walls of the citadel were built. Similarly to the defensive walls of the citadel, the foundation, trench, and footing were not registered. In some places, besides the outer facade of the defensive wall, a layer of fusillade was observed. It was mostly created as a result of the erosion of the less plaster, originally covering the face of the wall. A flanking tower with dimensions 2 meters 10 centimeters by 2 meters 60 centimeters without an internal room was later added to the outer facade of the defensive wall. The differences in the chronology of both structures were evidenced by difference in the levels of their foundations. However, complete lack of dating archaeological materials did not allow establishing the precise absolute chronology. Despite the fact that on the outer side of the defensive wall, the area was investigated at a distance of 7 meters, the presence of the defensive ditch was not recorded. It is puzzling that at the beginning of 20th century, Goszkiewicz saw the rampart and the trench on its western side on the surface of the site. In 2021, excavations were conducted in the northwestern corner of the Hillfort fortifications. The excavations carried out in Trench 6 led to the discovery of the northwestern corner of main line of fortifications. In these plains, a western curtain of defensive wall changed direction and turned east. Interestingly, the defensive wall was built here on an arch plan, to the top of which a flanking tower was added. The building technique used for construction of the wall and the tower was the same as in other places at Konsulovskoe Hillfort. The wall, 2 meters 20 centimeters width, was double-faced construction with a clay and stone filling, built using large and medium-sized stones bound with clay. The space between facades was filled with stones and clay. The flanking tower was rectangular in plan with dimensions 2 meters 30 centimeters by 4 meters. Similarly to the tower discovered in Trench 5, it has no internal room. Approximately 4 meters to the east of the tower, the gate leading to the inside of the Hillfort from the north was discovered. So far, only the gable limiting the gate from the west has been unearthed. Therefore, it's not possible to determine the width of the gate. Let me remind you that the width of the gate leading to the citadel was 1 meter 60 centimeters. To the north of the gate and the tower, the presence of defensive ditch was recorded. So far, only its counterscarp has been discovered. It has been dug in the virgin less. The total width of the trench the ditch is yet unknown, nor is its full depth known. However, by subtracting the deepest point of the ditch that has been reached so far from the foundation level of the defensive wall, its depth must be at least 2 meters 50 centimeters. The uncovered section of the ditch runs along the north-south line. Towards the east, the defensive ditch probably turns into a natural gully that limits the Hillfort from the north. From the west, it seems to continue its course towards the open steppe. Perhaps the defensive ditch then turned south and further east to join the gully, limiting the site from the south. If this was the case, the Konsulovskoe Hillfort would have as many as 3 lines of defense. Currently, there are no visible traces of the presence of an additional line of defense in the field. However, Elena Dzneladze and Denis Sikoza published a plan from the archive of Maria Ivanovna Vyazmitina, where this line of defense is clearly visible. Similar solutions are known from some other Late Scythian Hillforts on the lower Dnieper area, Annovskoe, Kozackoe, Zabłukowskoe, and perhaps Gavrilovskoe. However, already Viktor Ivanovich Goshkevich in the beginning of 20th century noticed that the first line of defense in the case of many Late Scythian Hillforts in this area could be destroyed due to the intensive economic activity in the modern times. A very interesting phenomenon is occurring on the territory of Konsulovskoe, human burials in close proximity to the defensive walls. So far, 2 burials were discovered. In both cases, human remains were in stone chests deposited without inventory. The excavations conducted on the territory of the citadel also brought the first information about housing of the site. In the trench 2, a semi-subterranean dwelling was discovered. It was super-rectangular, oblong in shape object oriented by the long axis on northwest-southeast direction. The recorded dimensions of the object were 4.5 meters by 2 meters. The northwest corner of this structure adjoined to the clay bank of which the defensive wall was built. From the western side, it was dug in the virgin less to a depth of 40 to 60 centimeters. The above ground part of the semi-subterranean dwelling was most likely built from the blocks cut from the less. 2 functional zones are distinguished inside the structure: a place for sleeping in the northern part of the object and a central part intended for everyday activities. On the territory of the site, the geoarchaeological research were also carried out. The fieldwork and analysis were done by Żanna Mikołajewna Matwiszyna. Their results helped in the reconstruction of the climate and geographical condition in the past. At the time when the Hillfort was founded, the climate was similar to the present one, but it was warmer and drier. Archaeobotanical remains and finds of cereal grains showed that the inhabitants of the Konsulovskoe cultivated barley, several types of wheat, and oat. Imprints of barley grains were also recorded on the surface of the fragments of clay used in the wattle and dock constructions. In addition to cereal grains, grape seeds, remains of water caltrop, and imprints of bulrush were also discovered. Archaeobotanical analyses were done by Galina Oleksandrivna Pashkiewicz. Archaeological materials discovered during the excavations showed the great predominance of mammals. Their bones consist more than 80% of all animals' remains. Nearly 16% are fish bones. The remaining less than 1% is distributed to single bones of birds, reptiles, and shells of mollusks. Among the mammals' remains, small and large ruminants are represented in almost equal proportions and consist two large groups of material, 42 and 43% respectively. The third place is occupied by horse's bone, 7.5%, and the fourth by pig bones, 4.2%. Apart that, the single bones of deer, roe deer, wild boar, dogs, and rodents were noted. Fish bones are represented by 7 species as common carp, common bream, vireo, common roach, whales, catfish, northern pine, and zander. The archaeological analyses were done by Evgenia Yurievna Janisz. The archaeological material obtained during excavations on the territory of the Konsulovskoe site enables establishing chronological frames for a long period from the 1st century BC to the 1st century ND, and maybe even later. Among them, the largest group consists fragments of handmade pottery of various forms and utility. Quite a large number of finds constitutes the bowls resembles zarubince forms. Interesting finds are various forms of handmade stoves. The amphorae assemblages included primarily the examples of containers produced from the 1st century BC to the 2nd century AD. Fragments of Vnukovce I amphorae type and Subkoan amphorae of unknown provenance provide in this group of material. Relatively frequent finds were also fragments of greyware pottery. The group of fineware pottery was represented by the examples of pergamene and Pontic vessels. Among other finds, the examples of reused pottery are well represented. Many other groups of artifacts have also been discovered at Konsulovskoe. Loom weights and ceramic spindle wheels, fishing weights, bone artifacts, beads, and jewelry. All of them are an excellent testimony to the material culture and everyday activities of the community inhabiting the site. And at the end of my lecture, I would like to express my gratitude to those who work with us from 2014 our Ukrainian colleagues and our Polish colleagues. And with this beautiful photo, when we go to the work on the site at sunrise, I would like to thank you for your attention and express my hope that we will be able to return to Konsulovskoe soon and continue our research. Thank you very much.